Thank you, David. I figure you all know Val's background. And I'm Krista. I moderated the first panel yesterday, and Val Ackerman got me my first job. 18 years ago, when she was the commissioner of the WNBA, she came to University of Oregon, where I was an MBA student, and she was keynoting our Women in Sports conference. And the next morning, I picked her up at 4 a.m. and drove her to the airport, a job which I had volunteered for, just to get a few minutes with this amazing woman. And she took off, and what she didn't realize at that moment was that I took off too. And the next year, we went to New York as like our whole graduate program. She met with me. She got me a meeting with her VP of broadcasting, and 2 weeks after I graduated, I walked into the WNBA offices into my dream job. And there I got to witness Val working in the everyday work. And what I witnessed was the highest level of intelligence, humble leadership, persistence, and patience that I've seen in my life. What also stuck with me was the awe and respect on the men's faces who were in the room, two of whom who happened to be the then NBA commissioner, David Stern, and now Commissioner Adam Silver. So it was really quite an extraordinary experience. Other than that, you know how we all have those kind of audacious first job moments where you reflect back now and you think, I can't believe I did that? Well, I had one with Val, and I think it was my first week on the job. She graciously invites me into her office to make sure I'm okay and I have everything that I need, and I decide this is the time to tell her I think it would be a great idea to evolve the WNBA's advertising messaging. And how she didn't just kick me straight out of the office, I'll never know, but she just curiously asked me why and what my ideas were. So Val, you invited and welcomed me to my dream table. I have never forgotten it, and you really showed me what was possible in extreme leadership, I will call it. Val Ackerman, everyone.
Thank you, Krista. Wow, that just bowls me over. Thank you for those kind words. I'm awed. I really don't quite know what to say, but I'm going to try. So, good afternoon, everyone, I guess. Start with that. It really is a tremendous honor for me to be here today and see so many friends and colleagues in support of this great initiative. I want to just acknowledge the earlier speakers. I arrived late yesterday, so missed the daytime programming. But I can tell you what I've heard here since I've been here has been just utterly inspiring. And in view of the high-minded nature of the conference, I thought I'd open up with this quote from our 28th president, Woodrow Wilson, who famously said the following: "You're not here merely to make a living. You are here in order to enable the world to live more amply, with greater vision, with a finer spirit of hope and achievement. You are here to enrich the world, and you impoverish yourself if you forget the errand." So clearly, the ability of sports to enable the world to live with a finer spirit of hope and achievement is a theme that I think resonates very deeply with all of us who are here for this event. I'm a former student athlete myself. I played basketball at the University of Virginia back in the early days of Title IX. I graduated in 19... and I'm honored to say, Krista noted the 18 years ago with the WNBA, but I have now been working in the sports business for nearly 30 years. I've had the privilege of working at the professional level, at the collegiate level now with the Big East Conference. I've done some work internationally, and I've had a chance to be on both the men's and women's sides of sports. And I can tell you that everything discussed here strikes a very, very strong chord with me for many, many different reasons. I'm also glued to the 2018 FIFA World Cup. I've been watching these games when I can on my phone, when I have to. And when you're taking in the images of people the world over who were brought together and starting earthquakes, right? Isn't that what happened in Mexico? Over groups of young men kicking soccer balls around large fields. It's really impossible not to be reminded about the extraordinary passions that sports ignite and how sport continues to be truly one of the very few platforms capable of bridging nations and cultures, even in a divided and polarized world like the one that we're living in today. I want to start off with a couple of acknowledgments, if you don't mind. I want to thank Monsignor Melchor Sanchez for making the very long trip from Rome to Los Angeles to be with us today. I had the privilege of meeting and working with Melchor in connection with the inaugural Sport at the Service of Humanity conference in Rome in 2016, and I can tell you that he was very much a driving force behind that. It's been a privilege for the Big East, our Deputy Commissioner Vincent Castro, who you've had a chance to hear from, our Senior Director of Conference Operations, Brianna Weiss, who's traveled with us, and for me, especially, to be associated with this initiative and to help carry forward the vision and the themes of that first gathering that we had in Vatican City. I can tell you that the principles espoused here are very important to our schools. We've got representatives from 5 of our schools here today. And while I don't have anything to announce, I can say that the chances are very good, Renata, how's that? That one of our schools will help continue the dialogue by hosting next year's SSH regional event. Yes, it will go back to the Big East from the West Coast Conference. We're gonna go back and forth. All right, so we're lined up here. David, I want to say what a pleasure it is to see you here today. I don't know if it's been noted, but David has been himself a key architect of this initiative. And I know you believe so deeply in the power of sports to unite people from so many walks of life and to foster positive social change. I want to thank you for your leadership and wish good luck to England in the World Cup. I know you're following the action closely there. I want to recognize LMU President Tim Snyder and Athletics Director Bill Husak. Thank you, Bill, for offering up this great university to host this event, and really more importantly than the 2 days that they've made possible for all of us, for everything you do to advance the ideals and the values of college sports and to develop your student athletes to be such great citizens and to live meaningful lives long after their playing days are over. You've had a great career. You'll be greatly missed in our profession. I want to give my thanks as well. I think she snuck in the back there to my fellow Division I Commissioner, Gloria Navarez. Hey, Gloria, from the West Coast Conference. Thank you. And I also want to especially thank Renata Simrel and your team at LA84 for your important work here in Southern California, and also for the outstanding efforts that you and your leadership in making this conference possible. A lot of what people we've heard from today are because of you, so thank you very much for that. And then last but not least, I want to acknowledge Philip Leopold from the Aspire Group and the SSH Foundation, and Malou Sulit from Lang Marketing, who's sitting somewhere here, for their tremendous continuing support of the Vatican's work in our event today. So lots of thank yous, but I'm telling you, they were needed and well-deserved. So it was 20 months ago now. Thought I'd give you maybe a little bit of the background to how we got here today. It was 20 months ago that those of us who were participants at that inaugural SSH event in Rome said our goodbyes to one another and started to think about and build on the dialogue that we had there about how faith and sport can bring people together, enrich lives, and serve the greater good of humanity. Melchor, David, Renata, Philip, Malou, and I were fortunate to be among those in attendance, and perhaps others of you who are here today. The Rome Conference was built around 3 I's, and I don't mean eyes, but I mean like letter I. And they were and are inspiration, inclusion, and involvement. And in addition to the I's, as you know by now, we created a framework built around these 6 principles that you see on these banners, or outcomes that we thought faith and sport acting in concert could engender. The principles were set up to offer what we thought would be a universal and easy to understand framework about how to act, about how to interact, and about how we can all grow as human beings, regardless of our ages, our races, our ethnicities, sexual orientations or genders, our social or economic statuses, or our political or religious beliefs or leanings. The Rome Conference had a broad-based audience, much like the one we have here today. It attracted, I don't know, David, roughly 200 or so, maybe more for some of the social events, participants from many corners of the globe, with the attendees including faith leaders, government officials, nonprofit and community organizers, representatives from professional sports leagues, corporate executives, educators, and others. Rome, by design, was set up to be very broad in scope. And in the 2 or 3 days that we had together there, we surfaced many themes and came up with many possible directions for follow-up. His Holiness Pope Francis touched on some of these themes in his opening remarks. Of course, a great thrill to have him there. The opening session included him, IOC President Thomas Bach, and UN Secretary General Ban Ki-moon. The Pope there spoke about how, quote, sport transcends the level of pure physicality and takes us into the arena of the spirit and even of mystery. The Pope went on to say that, quote, in sport, as in life, competing for a result is important, but playing well and fairly is even more important. And he urged a commitment to, quote, ensure that sport is always more inclusive and that its benefits are truly accessible to all. In Rome, our talk of inclusion extended to several groups: women and girls, the physically and mentally disabled, children, the elderly, and refugees, with breakout sessions set up to discuss strategies to advance access to sports for each one of those groups. It was quickly apparent that there was no shortage of work to be done to address the needs of those groups and the potential benefits of sport to them and to many others. Now, to say that Rome was a thought-provoking and inspiring event would be putting it mildly. And all of us who were there walked away highly energized about putting this SSH framework into action, not only within our respective organizations, but also within our daily lives. A number of Americans were part of that conference, and I'm happy to report that several, including those that I've already acknowledged, have taken an important leadership role in keeping the momentum from that first conference going. The Big East and Villanova were, of course, very proud to host the Vatican's first regional follow-up event last year on Villanova's campus in Pennsylvania. Our focus there was intentionally narrower than in Rome, and it keyed in on how these 6 principles function or can function or maybe should function within a particular sports outlet, and that was U.S. Intercollegiate athletics. The aim there was to more fully develop one of the many lines of inquiry that were brought forward in Vatican City, and that was how to harness the power of sports in the educational setting. The attendees at Villanova included over 100 athletics administrators, coaches, students, student athletes, team chaplains, campus ministers, and mission and ministry officers from 28 colleges and universities from around the country. The dialogue there, like it was in Rome, was robust, the energy levels were very high, and the conviction about how the worlds of faith and sports can learn from and enrich each other was unqualified and very strong. Our fundamental question at Villanova was this one: how can institutions of higher learning best meld the values of faith and sport to foster trust and understanding, to build character, to establish a sense of community, and importantly, to bring joy? His Eminence Cardinal Gianfranco Ravasi, who, as some of you may know, is the president of the Vatican's Pontifical Council for Culture and the force behind the SSH initiative, gave us a starting point for our inquiry when he said at the Rome Conference the following. Cardinal Ravasi said, "Sport is of such fundamental importance for education, allowing young people especially to open up to the trials of life, putting themselves to the test, crossing boundaries, meeting opponents on a level playing field while striving to be the best they can be, in some sense aiming for the transcendent." At Villanova, we devoted considerable discussion to how to manage athletics programs at the university level in a holistic way. That is, in a manner that focuses on the development of the whole person, mind, body, and spirit, and emphasizes the strength of community. We ascribed to the holistic intercollegiate athletics experience 3 prongs: academic exploration, particularly through the study of the humanities, sports participation, of course, and finally, the quest to establish a sense of meaning in life beyond what can be seen or comprehended by the human mind. A few words on each prong, starting with the first one, and most important one, which is academics. As many of you know, the famous NCAA TV commercial reminds us that most student athletes are going to go pro in something other than sports. As several speakers yesterday and today have noted, it's imperative, it's beyond imperative, that we all remember that no matter how strong the incentives may be to win, and if you were at the men's Final Four this past year rooting for Villanova, I can tell you winning is really great. But that said, we really can't lose sight of the higher purpose of college sports programs, and that is to enhance the learning experience of our students. We all know that sports have an important place on our campuses, but educational achievement is truly the end game and should always remain the highest priority. The SSH initiative, in fact, gives a nod to the primacy of learning by including enlightenment, here it is, right behind me, as one of the 6 principles. It's also worth reminding ourselves why it is that academics and enlightenment matter. Well, it's because we live in a very complex, diverse, and fast-changing world. And because our strength as the world's greatest melting pot here in the U.S., our strength lies in our collective ability to recognize and respect the differences that we have, to see life through the eyes of others, and to understand each other on terms other than on our own. We can foster that understanding by providing our student athletes not just any education, but one that challenges them to think critically and broadly, to develop an outlook that's globally informed, and to become creative problem solvers equipped to address society's most pressing needs. It's very hard to imagine that the outcomes envisioned in Rome, compassion, respect, love, enlightenment, balance, and joy, could be achieved without the knowledge and the broadening of one's mind that higher education and the humanities in particular make possible for our young people, our student athletes among them. I lived this firsthand in Virginia, where my major was something called political and social thought. It was an interdisciplinary major. It combined history, political philosophy, religion, literature, sociology. There were some foreign languages thrown in there, and other disciplines, as well as a thesis where, fittingly enough, I wrote about the role of play in sports in American society. I really believed in it back then. I knew I wanted to go to law school, and so it was a very good setup for that, but more importantly, all of these classes were just interesting to me. They gave me a framework to try to make some sense out of things, and more importantly, to enlighten me, use that word again, on topics that I didn't know very much about, or in some cases knew nothing at all about. So for students today, having a pathway to acquire knowledge, to acquire understanding, to acquire that global outlook is just as important as it was for me many decades ago. And I believe strongly that it's our job to make sure that our students have the time, they have the energy, and they have the encouragement to take advantage of the college part of college and build out this very critical part of themselves. And we're better than in the learning environments represented by the great schools in this room who have such incredible humanities traditions, Loyola, Marymount among them. The second part of the holistic collegiate athletics experience is athletics. I put that number 2. The role of sport in developing young people, building character was well described by Cardinal Ravasi, as I noted earlier, and I know easily grasped by everybody in this room. It's really clear to me that our coaches in particular are, as many here have accurately pointed out, are truly on the front lines in turning the experience of our student athletes into the training that's going to equip them for the game of life. And so part of the mission, at least it seems to me, is to make sure that our coaches have the skills and the mindsets to properly carry out their jobs and to serve the best interest of the athletes that they in turn serve. What I wanted to highlight, though, this afternoon is the often overlooked importance of sportsmanship as a behavioral virtue. What does it mean? It means showing respect. Respect, there it is, for opponents, For officials, for those responsible for upholding the rules, it's not always easy to do when the call doesn't go your way. And of course, accepting defeat gracefully. I sort of beseech all of us not to lose sight of the importance of sportsmanlike acts in all segments of our society, whether it's in athletics, whether it's in politics, whether it's in everyday life. And let's all pledge to continue to take advantage of the role that sports programs can play in reinforcing this value. And once again, the SSH initiative pays homage to it by incorporating respect into the Declaration of Principles. The third prong of the holistic collegiate athletics experience, which can be brought to life every day in the college sports world, is, as I mentioned earlier, the quest for meaning and a better understanding of the mystery of being. In Cardinal Rovasi's words, and aiming for the transcendent. We really do need to recognize the importance of this dimension of our students' existence, and we need to allow time for it in our students' daily lives. Who among us hasn't sought an explanation of why we've been put on this planet and thought or even agonized about what our destinies should be or will be? Who hasn't tried to make sense of this world or sought harmony and balance? Another one, balance, there it is, another principle. Or grappled with pain and suffering, or wrestled with how we relate to history, to the universe, to our fellow human beings. For some, the answers to those questions are in the rituals of organized religions or in scripture. For others, the answer may be in a sunrise or a flower or in a meditative state or in a long run on the beach or on a quiet country road. Wherever meaning can be found, our jobs, I think, are to open the doors for our student athletes to engage in that exploration, because their interpersonal development and their overall well-being truly depend on that. At a time when the mental health, as Gloria knows, when the mental health of our student athletes has emerged as a major focus and at times a major cause of concern, it strikes me that a healthy approach to spirituality and what that can do for balance and equanimity and peace of mind takes on a renewed meaning. The achievement of spiritual awareness is embodied in the missions of many of the colleges and universities here today, so all of you are truly uniquely positioned to foster this component of the student-athlete journey. The intangible part of the holistic experience, athletics experience, is exemplified by another theme that we brought forward in Rome, namely the importance of joy. There it is, joy's right behind me. Under the principles, sport above all is about enjoyment. Sport emanates from the more basic activity of play, which many scholars have described as intrinsic to the human condition. Play implies freedom, vitality, a retreat from daily life that's voluntary and spontaneous, and that allows us to renounce conventional responsibilities, at least for a little while. Play gives us the room to express ourselves and to experience joy. During the course of our planning for the Rome conference, some of the working group members surfaced the idea of sport as gratuita. Gratuita connotes beauty, possibility, freedom, the unrestrained release of hidden energies and passions. I bring up gratuita because I think its importance is often lost in our modern-day, hyper-competitive, goal-oriented sports world, college sports included. For young children, gratuita is actually critical, a critical component of their development, because it's through that liberation from the real world through play that the development of their selves, including through risk-taking, is truly allowed to unfold. In the collegiate sports setting, I think we sometimes so tightly manage our programs and our athletes that the opportunity for them to lose themselves in the sheer joy of sport can be lost by the wayside. Again, as we think about what to do to improve the mental wellness of our student athletes, we might want to consider the emotional, psychological, and the restorative benefits of unrestricted play, of being free to do what comes naturally during physical activity. Perhaps an occasional dose of gratuita should be added to every coach's best practices portfolio. I want to devote in my closing thoughts here a few moments to a final piece of the holistic experience, and that's community. For the schools here today and all around the country, we've all lived this. Athletic events serve as really an unparalleled bond. to bring together students, faculty, administrators, alumni, community supporters in a way that's really very unique in our society. The performances of student athletes are central to the formation of these bonds, and in turn, student athletes gain from their inclusion within the student community at large and also in their school's respective larger alumni circles or tribes. At the Villanova conference, we talked about the importance, as you all have here, of building positive and inclusive cultures and athletic programs and breaking down the silos that sometimes keep student athletes from thriving as part of the greater campus community. In Rome, we talked about how women, in particular, have reaped extraordinary benefits from their growing participation in sports over the past few decades, but how more can be done to stimulate that inclusion and access, and importantly, how we can add to the number of women who are in decision-making positions in sports organizations of all kinds. Many of the women in this room, myself included, are here. We're here where we are today because we played organized sports at the youth level, in high school, in college, and perhaps in a few rare cases beyond. And it's critical that future generations of girls have the same or better opportunities. Our society will be truly enriched if that happens. I'd like to give a shout out for the program that the Big East is affiliated with that's making an extraordinary contribution to the development of women leaders, and that's the Global Sports Mentoring Program that's sponsored by the U.S. State Department and ESPNW in conjunction with the Center for Sport, Peace, and Society at the University of Tennessee. Every year for the past 6 years, State has brought 16 or so female sports executives from other countries to the U.S. and placed them for 3 weeks in prominent sports organizations with orientation and then exit sessions in D.C. at either end. The delegates come here, they gain expertise, they make contacts, they write action plans, and they pick up tools to help them with their work when they return to their home countries. Nearly 100 women from 53 countries have come through the program. Our conference has now hosted women from Vietnam, Argentina, and Uganda, and we will be welcoming our 4th delegate in the program this fall. Dr. Sarah Hillier from UT is with us today, and together with her colleague, Dr. Ashley Huffman, she is making an incredible difference by empowering women and helping bring the many, many benefits of sports to women in other cultures through their work and through the work of this empowered network. It's truly a model program and a tremendous example of how women in the U.S. can share our experiences and extend the power of sports to parts of the world that are simply not as far along. And to put a punctuation point on my shout out to Sarah, GSMP was just named a Scott Stewart Inspire Award nominee, which is one of ESPN's humanitarian awards. And Sarah will be picking up the hardware for that, the ESPYs, next month here in LA. So Sarah, congratulations to you on that and your great work. Thank you. If anyone is looking for a really big project to take on, think about a Title IX for the World global campaign. As many of you know, no other country has put the force of federal law behind the desire to expand sports opportunities for women and girls. And I'm convinced that if leaders in other countries could exercise the political will to pass Title IX counterparts within their borders, that societies everywhere could gain, just as we have here in the United States over the last 45 years or so. And as a final point, the theme of community is, of course, strengthened for our schools through their commitment to service. I know this is very important to the West Coast Conference and the Big East, a looking past self and one's own needs to help those who are suffering and could simply use a hand. Finally, and let me just say, I can't imagine a more important time to stress all of the themes and the potential of the sport at the service of humanity movement to make a difference in people's lives, seemingly daily. We see or we read or we hear about or experience directly in some cases intolerance, division, exclusion, inflammatory words, disrespect, and too often hate. We find ourselves confronted by the worst in people, it seems, but times like this remind us of the obligation to think about what we can do to bring out the best in people so they have a chance to become their fullest selves and live with hope. At the end of the day, the answer may lie most of all in the human touch, that one-on-one interaction many of them every day that we have that teach a lesson, that lighten a load, that bring a smile, that express gratitude. How about just saying thank you every now and again? That guide, that inspire, acts that communicate compassion and love, two of the declaration, two of the principles. You know, we can always use apps or funds or strategies or grand plans. They help too, but to serve humanity or change a life, maybe it's enough just to be considerate and kind. So thanks to all of you for listening. I appreciate your attention. Thanks to Renata again for this amazing couple of days, and I hope everybody enjoys the rest of the sessions. Thank you.